I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Jake, and I've been with my wife, Emily, for about 6 years now. We met in college, started dating, and everything seemed pretty solid at first. She's gorgeous, confident, a little bitchy sometimes, but in a way I thought was just her personality. We got engaged about a year ago, and I was honestly pretty happy. I always thought I'd marry her, and she made me feel like I was the only guy in the world. But lately, things have been off. Small things at first, missed calls, late nights, her being kinda secretive about her phone. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I mean, I trust her, or at least I thought I did. Still, I noticed her snapping at me more often, her being a little colder, less affectionate. I brushed it off mostly, convincing myself she was just stressed or busy with work. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something I didn't want to face. Then about a week ago, I started noticing her phone was more locked than usual. She always kept it close, but now she was hiding it even when she was in the bathroom or running errands. I'd catch her texting someone late at night, but she'd quickly shove her phone away or act like I was imagining things. Little things that gnawed at me, but I didn't have any proof, so I kept quiet. Until I found those messages. I wish I could say I was snooping intentionally, but it was accidental. I was just looking for a charger in her purse and saw her phone buzzing on the table. I glanced over and there it was, a string of flirty messages with her supposed best man at the wedding, Mike. It hit me like a ton of bricks. The messages were explicit, flirty, and downright disgusting in some parts. They'd been going on for months, I realized. Months. I couldn't believe I missed all these signs. Her dodging my questions, her avoiding intimacy, her being cold and distant. She'd been sneaking around the entire time and I had no idea. It felt like my whole world was shattering inside my head. I stared at her messages, trying to process how she could do this, how she could lie so effortlessly. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at her phone, her messages blaring in front of me. The betrayal was so deep I could taste it. I thought about all the plans we made, our future, the wedding we were about to have. And then I thought about Mike, her best man, the guy I'd known for years. Everyone trusted him. Hell, I even considered him a friend. Now I see him for what he really is. A piece of shit who couldn't keep his cock in his pants even at the expense of his best friend's happiness. I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see the truth. But I also knew what kind of person Emily is. She's bitchy, manipulative, and a master liar. When I woke her up the next morning, I just handed her the phone and her face twisted into this defiant, annoyed expression. "So you want to tell me what this is?" I asked, voice trembling but trying to stay steady. She looked at me, then at the screen, and rolled her eyes. "Jake, it's nothing, just some stupid texts." "It's harmless, I swear. You're overreacting, you always do." I felt like I'd been punched. Harmless. These messages are from the guy you're supposed to marry me with, Emily. They're explicit. How long has this been going on? She sat up straight, crossing her arms. "It's not what you think, we're just friends. Mike's been going through a rough patch and I was just trying to be there for him, that's all." "Friends don't send each other these kinds of messages, Emily. You're lying, I see it. I see what you're hiding. How long has this been going on? How long have you been cheating on me?" She scoffed. "I don't have to justify myself to you. You're blowing things out of proportion. Maybe you're just insecure. Anyway, I don't have to explain myself. This is just a mistake and I'll fix it. You're overreacting as usual." Her words stung worse than anything I'd ever heard. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I was starting to realize that maybe I never really knew her at all. She was hiding so much behind that bitchy attitude. And Mike. He was just a pawn, a guy who'd always been around, pretending to be my friend but secretly waiting for the right moment to screw me over. That's when I decided I couldn't just ignore this anymore. I needed to know everything. I needed to figure out how deep this really went. I couldn't trust her, not anymore. I had to come up with a plan, a way to make her see that I wasn't going to be played like a fool. I wanted revenge, pure and simple. She thought she could betray me and I'd just shrug it off. Hell no. She was about to learn just how much she'd messed up. After I saw those messages, I couldn't even look at her the same way. Everything about Emily suddenly felt different, like I'd been living next to a stranger, a liar who had been secretly screwing around with my best man behind my back. I stayed up all night, trying to piece things together, trying to figure out what I could do. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew better. I needed a plan. I needed to get evidence, to understand how long this had been going on, and most importantly, how to make her regret it. The next morning, I played it cool. I didn't say much at first. I just sat there staring at her, waiting for her to say something. She was acting all innocent, bitchy as hell, but pretending to be the victim. She kept telling me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that it was just some stupid flirtation. Then she started lying, saying Mike was just helping her with some work stuff, that they only texted about boring things, and that I was crazy for jumping to conclusions. She cussed at me a few times in that tone she always used when she thought she was smarter than everyone else. I didn't say a word. Instead, I decided I'd be the one to do the talking once I had all the facts. I acted like I was just letting her talk, but inside I was already planning my next move. I didn't want to just confront her and blow up. I wanted to catch her in the act, catch her lying, and make sure she knew I had all the proof. So I started digging. I went through her phone, her emails, even her social media accounts. I wanted to know how long the affair had been going on, who else she was hiding from me. And that's when I found the real shocker. She'd been meeting up with Mike in secret. There were texts from places I knew they'd been, restaurants, hotels, even her apartment when she thought I wasn't around. She lied about everything. When I finally confronted her again, this time with the evidence, she got furious. Started yelling, calling me crazy, saying I was paranoid, that I was ruining everything just because I was insecure. I remember her looking at me, her eyes full of contempt, and saying, "You're just jealous. Mike doesn't mean anything. You're so insecure, it's pathetic." That's when I realized she was a full-blown bitch. She had no intention of stopping, no remorse, just more lies to cover her ass. I felt so betrayed, so humiliated. How could she do this? How could my own wife, my future, be so disgusting? I was furious, but I kept my composure, knowing I had to be smart about this. I had to get her to admit everything, or at least know she couldn't deny it anymore. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that I couldn't just walk away, not yet. I needed something to make her realize she crossed a line she could never come back from. That's when my mind started turning to revenge. I didn't want to just divorce her and walk away. I wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused me, what she'd done to us, to me. I wanted her to understand what she lost, how I was done with her bullshit. So I started planning. I knew she'd be at work that day, so I took her phone, backed up all the messages, then set her up with a little surprise. I installed a hidden app that would record her calls and texts, just to keep tabs on her, make sure she wasn't trying to lie her way out of it again. I also reached out to Mike, just to have a conversation, no threats, no yelling, just to see how deep this really went. Turns out, Mike was just as much of a bastard as I thought. He admitted everything, said he knew I was a good guy, but he couldn't resist her charm. That hurt more than anything, knowing my own best man had been betraying me for months. I was starting to get sick to my stomach, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to do something about this. I couldn't let her get away with it, not without some kind of consequence. I wasn't going to be the guy who gets walked all over. I had enough pride for that. So I kept my cool while I gathered more evidence, more proof that she'd been lying to me for months. I wanted her to see that I wasn't some fool who'd forgive her easy. I wanted her to wake up and realize she'd lost everything, me, our future, whatever respect I had left for her. This was just the beginning. After collecting all the evidence, I felt a strange mix of anger, betrayal, and determination. I couldn't believe how deep her lies ran, how she'd convinced herself she could get away with it for so long. I knew I couldn't just confront her and hope she'd come clean. No, this needed to be done right. I had to make her see that I wasn't going to be some doormat, some guy she could cheat on without consequences. The next step was planning my confrontation carefully. I decided I'd do it face to face, but I needed to be in control of the situation. I scheduled to meet her after work, telling her I wanted to talk about us, about the wedding, and how I'd been feeling. I wanted her to think I was just upset but still willing to listen. Inside, though, I was already calculating my next moves. I knew how manipulative Emily could be, how she'd try to turn things around on me, deny everything, and probably yell or cry to make me feel guilty. When I saw her that evening, she looked annoyed, like I was bothering her. She was trying to act like everything was fine, like she hadn't been caught dead to rights. I kept my cool, but I was boiling inside. I told her I found out about the messages, about the meetings with Mike, and that I wasn't going to tolerate her lying anymore. Her reaction, classic Emily. She rolled her eyes, shrugged her shoulders, and said, "Oh, so now you're accusing me of cheating. You're just jealous because I don't want to be with someone who's paranoid and insecure." That was the moment I snapped. I pulled out her phone and showed her all the messages, the hotel receipts, the times she'd been with Mike. Her face twisted into this fake innocent look, and she snapped back, "That's not what it looks like. You're blowing things out of proportion. It's just sex, Jake. It doesn't mean anything. We're not even really doing anything serious." That's when I lost my temper. "Just sex? You call that just sex? You've been sneaking around behind my back for months, Emily. While I was planning a future with you, you were busy screwing my best man. Do you even realize what you've done? Do you even care?" She started crying then, but it was that fake crying that pisses you off even more. "You don't understand. I was stressed. Mike, been there for me. It's not what you think. It's just sex, Jake. It's not a big deal. I love you, I do." I looked at her and thought about all the times she'd lied, all the times I'd trusted her. That "I love you" sounded hollow, like she was just trying to manipulate me again. I knew then that I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to make her see that she'd crossed the line. She'd betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without consequences. I told her I knew about everything, that I had proof, and that I was done. I said I was tired of her lies, tired of her bullshit, and tired of pretending I was okay with her cheating on me with my best man. I knew she'd try to deny it again, but I wasn't letting her. I was ready to walk away if that's what it took, but I also wanted her to understand she'd lost me completely. Her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations, they all added up to one thing: she had destroyed what we had. The rest of the night was a blur. She kept crying, pleading, trying to convince me that she was sorry, that she'd never do it again. But I'd heard enough. I told her I needed time to think, that I couldn't just forgive her, not after this. I packed a bag, told her I was leaving for a while, and she screamed at me, calling me crazy, saying I was overreacting again. I didn't care. I knew I'd made up my mind. I couldn't look her in the eyes anymore, knowing what she'd done. That night I stayed at a friend's place trying to process everything. I felt like my whole world had crumbled. How could someone I trusted so much do this to me? How could she lie so effortlessly? I kept replaying those messages, those moments when she told me she loved me, and then I'd remember how she'd been screwing around with Mike the whole time. It was a punch to the gut every time. I was angry, but I was also hurt. Deep down, part of me still loved her, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this betrayal. I kept asking myself how I let it get this far, how I missed all the signs. But honestly, I was blinded by love, or maybe just naive. She's a bitch, and now I see her for what she really is. The worst part, I'm not even sure I want her back, but I do know I want her to pay for what she's done. I deserve better than this. The days that followed were brutal. I kept replaying everything in my head: her lies, her sneaking around, the messages, the hotel receipts. It felt like a punch in the stomach every time I thought about how she'd betrayed me, not just as a wife but as my best friend. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so stupid. The worst part was knowing she had been lying so effortlessly, acting innocent when she'd been screwing Mike behind my back for months. I didn't want to rush into any decisions. I needed time to think, to cool off, but at the same time, I was starting to see how far she was willing to go to keep her lies hidden. I decided I'd play it smart, gather more proof, see what she was doing when I wasn't around. I installed a discreet app on her phone that recorded her calls and texts, just to confirm everything I suspected. I needed her to see I wasn't as naive as she thought. I wanted her to understand that I knew exactly what she'd been doing and that I wasn't going to accept it. Meanwhile, I reached out to Mike. I was calm, collected, no threats, just a simple conversation. I wanted to know how deep this really went, how long he'd been involved. Turns out he'd been texting her almost daily for months, sneaking around behind my back and even meeting up in secret. Hearing that from him confirmed everything I'd already found. I didn't get angry with him. What was the point? I just listened, let him admit it all. Part of me wanted to lash out, but I knew that wouldn't serve any purpose. I just needed to see the full scope of her lies. Then I confronted her again, this time with even more proof. I sat her down and laid everything out. Her reaction, typical Emily. She rolled her eyes, said I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk, trying to gaslight me into thinking I was the one losing it. I was furious, but I kept my composure. I told her I knew about the meetings, the messages, the hotel stays. Her face went pale for a second, then she snapped back with her usual defiance. "You're crazy, Jake," she spat. "You're just jealous because I don't want to be with a guy who's so insecure. Mike's just a friend, nothing more. You're making this up in your head." I looked her right in the eyes and said, "No, Emily, I've got everything right here, and I don't believe a word you're saying anymore. You've been lying to me for months. You're a cheater and you're a liar. I don't know how you can look me in the face and lie like that, but I'm done trusting you." That's when she started to get angry, trying to manipulate me, saying I was crazy, that I didn't understand her, that I was just jealous. But I'd heard enough. The betrayal ran too deep now. I realized I couldn't keep pretending I was okay with this. I told her I was done with the lies, done with the betrayal. I told her I was going to take some time to figure out what was next. She screamed, called me every name in the book, begged me not to leave, but I was already outside, grabbing my coat. I felt numb, empty, like I'd been punched repeatedly. She was yelling behind me, calling me a psycho, saying I was overreacting. Again, but I didn't care anymore. I knew the truth, and I knew I couldn't trust her. It was as simple as that. I went to stay with a friend for a few days, trying to clear my head. Part of me wanted to rip her apart, to make her regret everything she'd done, but I knew I had to be smart. Revenge was tempting, but what I really needed was distance. I needed to get out of this chaos and figure out my next move. Every night I'd lie awake and think about how it all went so wrong so fast. How I'd loved her, trusted her, and she'd just thrown it all away with a few stupid messages. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, more angry than I'd ever been in my life. But deep down, I also knew I deserved better. I was finally starting to see her for what she really was, a bitch who thought she could get away with everything. And I was done being her fool. The days turned into a blur of sorting through my thoughts and trying to rebuild some sense of clarity. I had made up my mind. I was leaving her. No matter what. Not just for my own sanity, but because I finally realized I deserved someone who wouldn't lie, cheat, and betray me. That moment of clarity hit hard. I wasn't going to be the guy who gets played for a fool. Emily had crossed a line, and I was sick of trying to pretend it didn't happen. But I also knew I needed to be careful. Emily was manipulative, and I'd learned that the hard way. I couldn't just leave without her trying to spin everything in her favor or guilt-tripping me into staying. So I started planning my exit meticulously. I arranged to stay with a friend for a few days, packed a bag, and made sure I had all the proof I needed, screenshots of her messages, call recordings, everything. I wanted her to realize that I'd seen through her lies, and I wasn't coming back without some serious consequences. Before making the move, I texted her a simple message. "We need to talk, face to face." I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation when I confronted her again, so I was ready. I wanted her to see that I was serious, that I was going to be swayed by her usual bitchy attitude or tears. I also reached out to Mike one last time, just to hear him admit everything again, to reinforce what I already knew. This wasn't some misunderstanding or a mistake she'd made. It was outright betrayal. When I finally sat her down again, she looked smug, like she still thought she could spin her way out of this. I laid out everything I'd collected. The texts, the hotel receipts, the recordings. Her eyes flickered with annoyance and then panic. She tried to deny, to say I was crazy, that I was just jealous, that she loved me and that I was overreacting, but I cut her off. I told her I'd had enough, that I knew what she'd done and I wasn't going to forgive her. Her face twisted into that fake, bitchy smirk. "You're just jealous, Jake. You're insecure. Mike's just a friend, nothing more. You're losing your mind over nothing." Her voice was dripping with contempt, like she thought she was the victim here, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I looked her right in the eye and said, "You've been lying to me for months. You've been screwing my best man behind my back while I was planning our wedding. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't see what you really are?" She started crying, but it was that fake, manipulative crying she always did when she was caught. I didn't buy it. I just told her I was done, that I was leaving, that I'd had enough of her bullshit. I explained I was moving out that day, and I didn't want to hear any more lies. She begged, tried to guilt me, called me crazy, said she loved me and that she'd fix everything. But I'd heard enough. I knew she'd just keep lying, keep hiding her secrets, and I wasn't going to be a part of that anymore. So I packed my stuff and left. I didn't look back. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that I finally saw her for what she was, nothing but a manipulative, cheating bitch, and anger at myself for being so blind for so long. I'd trusted her, loved her, and she'd thrown it all away for some meaningless sex with Mike. That memory will stay with me, the betrayal, the lies, the knowing she'd used me as a fool. In the days since, I've been trying to put the pieces back together. I've blocked her on everything, cut off all contact, and I'm focusing on myself. I've started therapy, talking to friends, trying to process the pain. Honestly, it's a slow process, but I know I'll get through it. What I learned from all this is that trust is fragile, and betrayal cuts deeper than I ever thought possible. I also learned that some people are just selfish. Emily, Mike. They only care about themselves, their own pleasure, and they don't think about the damage they leave behind. If I could give anyone advice, it'd be this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the warning signs, and don't let anyone treat you like you're nothing. Because in the end, you're the only one who truly cares about yourself. Emily might have thought she could get away with her lies, but I see now that karma has a way of catching up. I'll move on, rebuild, and find someone who respects me. That's all I really want. Looking back, I realize how much this whole mess has changed me. I used to think I was someone who could trust blindly, who believed in love and loyalty without question. Now I see how naive that was. Trust is something you earn, not give away easily, especially not to someone who's capable of lying and cheating behind your back for months. Emily's betrayal wasn't just about the sex or the messages. It was about the complete erosion of everything I thought was real between us. Since leaving her, I've learned a lot about myself. I'm stronger than I thought. I've also learned that some people will do anything to satisfy their own selfish desires, regardless of who they hurt. I won't let this define me, though. I refuse to be the guy who gets broken by betrayal. Instead, I see it as a lesson, hard, painful, but necessary. It's made me more cautious, more aware, more prepared for what's out there. I've started focusing on myself, my career, my hobbies, my friends. I've reached out to people I trust, and I've found comfort in their support. I'm not angry all the time anymore, just sad some days. But sadness is part of healing. I know I'll eventually move past it. I've decided that I'm not going to let her or Mike or the betrayal control my life. I'm in charge now, and I'm going to rebuild what I lost, better, wiser, and more cautious. The biggest thing I've taken from this experience is the importance of standing up for myself. Never again will I ignore the signs, the gut feelings, or the small red flags that tell me someone isn't being honest. I won't be afraid to cut someone out of my life if they betray me like she did. Because at the end of the day, I have self-respect. And I refuse to let someone's lies and selfishness diminish that. So, to anyone going through something similar, trust your instincts, never ignore your feelings, and don't be afraid to walk away. Because if someone truly loves you, they won't need to cheat or lie to prove it. And if they do, it's better to know sooner rather than later. Because betrayal is a poison that destroys everything good, and you deserve better than to be anyone's fool. I've learned that some betrayals cut so deep that they leave scars. But scars fade, time heals, and eventually you find a way to move on stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever's next.